Today, we'll review a news article about an important political meeting in Alaska between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And from this, you'll improve all areas of your fluency. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. Our headline, what to know about the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. Question for you. Why is this article here? Because we have Trump, Putin. This article, is attached to meeting because meeting is a singular countable noun. You would say, I had a meeting for any meeting. I had the meeting for a specific meeting. So Trump-Putin, as you can see, there's this dash here. This functions as an adjective. It describes the meeting. You can use Trump and Putin, of course, as nouns, proper nouns, and change the wording and say what to know about the meeting in Alaska between Trump and Putin. Now, notice sometimes I pronounce this T and say Putin, tin, and sometimes I'll drop it and say Putin. Putin. That's just a very common thing in spoken English, specifically spoken American English. You will hear me, as well as all native speakers, do the same thing. And the pronunciation without the T is more common, especially in casual speech. Now notice our headline starts with what, which as you know is commonly a question word. However, this headline is not written as a question. It's written as a statement. What to know. This is more of a short form. The longer form could be what you need to know about the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. If this were a question, the sentence structure would be different. Do you know how to take this and form it into a question? What do you know about the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska? So maybe a friend asks you this or a coworker. Oh, hey, what do you know? What do you know about? That would be the question form, adding the auxiliary verb do. There are other ways to form a question, but that's the first one I thought of if you were going to ask someone about this meeting. Don't worry about taking these notes. I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Now let's continue and learn about this meeting. When President Trump was flying to Alaska for his summit with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, Trump said the main goal was a ceasefire. Okay, so notice here we have the past continuous. The verb to be conjugated in the past with the subject, he, she, it, was, and then your verb in ing. This is because the meeting is in the past. So the sentence structure is also in the past and is talking about the continuation of a past action. When President Trump was flying to Alaska for his summit with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, Trump said the main goal was, again, because it's in the past, a ceasefire. He said he'd be disappointed. Okay, what is this apostrophe D? What word does it represent? It represents would. Is that what you said? Because the apostrophe D can also represent the word had, but grammatically, the sentence would be incorrect if it were had. It must be would. You know that from the sentence structure. And again, he would be disappointed because it's in the past. He said he'd be disappointed. Notice this pronunciation. He'd, a very soft D. He'd be disappointed. In spoken English, you won't hear it. It will be difficult to hear it, but it's the sentence structure that makes it obvious that it's there. A native speaker doesn't need to hear it to understand the sentence structure because we have be disappointed if it didn't happen. So this is reported speech in the past, and it's a hypothetical past because at the time, he didn't know what would happen because he was flying to Alaska. The meeting hadn't taken place at that time. So he'd be disappointed if it didn't happen, and he warned, but you don't have to repeat he because the subject doesn't change. After and, you need to repeat words if they're different. But since it's the same, we don't need to repeat it. And warned of severe consequences. So here, the sentence structure also notice is to be disappointed. So in the present simple, you would say, I am disappointed. I am disappointed. And then in the past simple, I was disappointed. This is an advanced sentence structure. So let me give you another example. I could say, I'll be disappointed. So notice I'm using to be disappointed. This is the adjective form. That's why it's always in the ED. And then your verb is be to describe your current state. This is in the future simple. I will be disappointed if my students don't comment, let's go. It took me a lot of effort to create this lesson for you, and commenting tells me that you enjoyed the lesson and got value from it. So I'll be disappointed if you don't comment because it's like you didn't get any value from this or you didn't enjoy it. Now let's turn that into reported speech. Jennifer said she'd be disappointed if her students didn't comment, let's go. So that's the same structure that we have here. Now, one more thing I want to point out. I don't want to disappoint Jennifer, so you can say this, hopefully. I don't want to disappoint Jennifer. Notice here, disappoint is an active verb, so you can absolutely conjugate it. I disappointed Jennifer. So that would be the active verb in the ED form for the past simple. But in this ED form, it's the adjective with the verb be. I don't want to disappoint Jennifer, the infinitive. So I commented, let's go. So make sure you comment, let's go, so I know you're enjoying this lesson and you want me to make more.
Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson.
But shortly after meeting Putin, of course we have after, which is a preposition, so that's why you have your next verb in the ing form. Shortly after meeting Putin, Trump reversed himself. So in a car, if you go in reverse, you go backwards. So if you reverse yourself, you say something that's the opposite. So if you said something simple like, I like that movie, and then the next day you say, I don't like that movie, you reversed yourself. So that's what it means here. You changed your opinion. You're saying the opposite of what you previously said. So Trump reversed himself and said a ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war wasn't critical. So before the meeting, he said the opposite. It is critical. And here, notice again, this functions as an adjective. It describes the war. So the, as we saw in the headline, the is attached to war. War doesn't always require an article. If you're using it in a general context, you don't need an article. So in a general context, you can say war is something we should prevent. We need to teach our children about the damages of war. So it's not a specific war, it's just war in general. So in that case, you don't need an article, but this is specific. The war between Russia
and Ukraine. So remember, when you use the adjectives as nouns, you would use between. The war between Russia and Ukraine. Let's continue. He wrote, so again, he being Trump, because it's the last subject mentioned, he wrote on social media that it was determined by all that the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine, so here you see them as nouns, exactly what we talked about here. So as adjectives, this would be the horrific Russia-Ukraine war. So again, the war, horrific is an adjective, which means extremely terrible. And then you can add another adjective being Russia-Ukraine with that dash, because adjectives often have dashes. So the horrific Russia-Ukraine war. So in this case, to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement. So here, he's saying the best way. So this is our superlative, and that's why we have the, because the plus superlative. So we have good, and then the superlative form is best. The best way is to go directly to a peace agreement. So here, the article would be an if it were just agreement. But peace tells you what type of an agreement. Now notice how these are capitalized. If something is capitalized, in this case, is being treated as a proper noun. So here, a peace agreement, this could be the name of the document, the official document. And that's why it's capitalized. So it just represents that it's being used as a proper noun, the official name of the agreement. But as a noun, it still requires an article, which would end the war and not a mere ceasefire agreement. So again, ceasefire agreement. So this is the official name of the agreement. Grammatically, it would be exactly the same in lowercase. It just would show that it's not a proper noun. It's just an agreement. What type? A ceasefire agreement. And again, is the article with the noun agreement. Mere is an adjective. A mere ceasefire agreement. By adding mere, it reduces the importance of a ceasefire agreement. It makes it sound like it's not that important. This is a great adjective to have in your vocabulary when you want to reduce the importance of something, which can be used very strategically. You can say, it's a mere 25-minute walk to the store. So you're letting the person know that, it's just 25 minutes. Without mere, they might be surprised. Wow, 25 minutes? That sounds far. We should drive, take an Uber, take a bus, whatever it might be. But if you say, it's a mere 25 minutes, they might feel like they have to agree because you made it sound like such an insignificant thing. So it's a great word to use strategically. And notice here, 25-minute walk. Again, we have all walk. Walk is the noun. All is the article that belongs to the noun. Mere is an adjective. And 25-minute is also an adjective, which is why you see this dash between them to show that they're connected, and why you do not see an S, because adjectives do not have a singular and plural form. So to use it in the regular noun form, it took us 25 minutes to walk to the store. Okay, so it took us X amount of time. And in this case, if it's more than 1 minute, it would be plural. It took us 25 minutes. But in this first one, this is an adjective. So here, which would end the war and not a mere ceasefire agreement. Now, which oftentimes do not hold up. Okay, so this additional information is giving us
more information on why it's a mere ceasefire agreement, why you would take something and reduce its importance, because they don't always hold up. Hold up means that they remain official or people follow the rules of them. Sometimes if you have a contract, but let's say you're buying a house from someone, you and the seller, the buyer and seller, sign the contract, but a lawyer does not sign it, and it wasn't stamped by someone official. Your friend may advise you that won't hold up in court. That won't be valid. That won't be official in court because you needed more to make it official. So in this case, if it doesn't hold up, it means that the parties won't follow the agreement or it won't be official. Let's keep going. Experts across the defense and foreign policy spectrums. So a spectrum can just represent a domain or an area, an industry, and across represents that it's inclusive of everyone or everything within that range. So experts across the defense and foreign policy spectrums agree. So here we have experts agree. Our verb agree is conjugated with the noun experts. All of this is additional information that describes experts. So when you're writing or in something official like your IELTS, you always want to ask yourself, where's my verb? What's my subject? And then make sure they agree. Experts agree that external monitors and international security guarantees for Ukraine are the only way a ceasefire. So notice here, it's not in the first letter isn't capitalized. And they also don't have the word agreement. So here they're just using it as a noun, a ceasefire. But they could also say the only way a ceasefire agreement. So they're just leaving out the word agreement, but it would represent the same thing. But not being in capitals is just the noun. It's any ceasefire agreement. And then as capitalized, the first letter, it means an official noun. It's the official title, so it makes it a proper noun. The only way a ceasefire or even a full-fledged peace settlement. So full-fledged, honestly, fledged doesn't add very much. So you could just say a full peace settlement. Full meaning it includes every detail or every aspect you can think of. It's simply the full peace agreement. Full-fledged can also mean at the highest level. So it's often used to celebrate or let someone know your current status. So you can say, I'm finally a full-fledged doctor. Because doctors go through years of different trainings. So at one stage, even though you've graduated, you still have to do a lot of training. So you're still not a full-fledged doctor, but then you can celebrate it. So here, a doctor, because full-fledged is an adjective. Now notice this ED is a very soft D, full-fledged, full-fledged doctor. Now, because this starts with D, you don't even hear the ED there. I'm finally a full-fledged doctor. Full-fledged peace. So you may hear a very soft full-fledged peace, but it can also be totally silent. So if you don't hear that ED in spoken English, that's normal. Just know it's there in spelling. Or even a full-fledged peace settlement, again, between Russia and Ukraine. So here they function as nouns, and we have between X and Y, would have a chance of success. So now let's review this together, just the important information. So experts agree that external monitors, so people monitoring the situation, monitoring what's happening in Russia, what's happening in Ukraine, and external meaning
not people in Russia, not people in Ukraine, other parties. And international security guarantees for Russia are the only way a ceasefire would have a chance of success. So this would have a chance of success gets quite lost after we stop and review everything, but it's connected to the ceasefire. The ceasefire would have a chance of success. Let's keep going. And there was no indication from Putin on Friday. That's when the meeting took place between Trump and Putin in Alaska. There was no indication from Putin on Friday that he was prepared to accept anything like that. So, prepared to accept anything like that? What's the anything like that? It's the external monitors and international security guarantees specifically for Ukraine. Now, there was no indication. Notice this sentence structure. So, to be, but then it's negative. There was no indication. This makes it sound stronger than saying there wasn't any indication. An indication represents that he either said something or maybe even nodded his head in agreement or made some sort of gesture to suggest he was open to this. He was willing to accept it, but there was no indication. This is a great sentence structure, so let me share a natural example. You might say, when I spoke to her yesterday, there was no indication she was upset. Notice I have that, it's optional. There was no indication, and then a clause, she was upset. Now here it's from Putin because it wasn't previously mentioned, but I don't need to say from her because I have spoke to her. So I already have the subject identified, but this is important because if you don't have the subject identified, notice you would use the preposition from someone. When I spoke to her yesterday, there was no indication that she was upset. So how would there be an indication? Maybe she was her voice was lower because I spoke to her. So you didn't see her, but she was like, fine, no, nothing's wrong. So the tone of her voice, or maybe the words she said, I don't like that, I'm upset, I'm disappointed, which would be an indication of someone being upset. So no sign or nothing suggested. It's great to have in your vocabulary. Let's keep going. Zelensky said Russia's unwillingness, so the unwillingness belongs to Russia. Russia's unwillingness to pause the fighting would complicate efforts to forge lasting peace. So in this case, forge means to create lasting peace. Now you might be wondering, well, why not just use the word create? Because sometimes words have a feeling involved. So when you forge something, you create it, but you create it from a state of difficulty or strain or tension. So you create from a negative situation. Let's continue. Nevertheless, Zelensky said he would meet Trump in Washington on Monday. Now, at the time of this recording, this meeting hasn't taken place. But actually today is Monday, so this news review will be available. And notice, nevertheless, this is used to contrast. So here, this sounds somewhat negative because Russia's unwillingness, it will complicate efforts. But then this is something positive. Zelensky said he would meet with Trump. So that sounds positive. So we can use nevertheless to connect two opposing ideas, a negative and a positive, or you can start with a positive and then connect to a negative. Let's keep reading. That will evoke memories. The verb here, evoke, this means that it will cause you to remember. So it will bring to mind the memories. It will remind you of something, in this case, the meeting. And that represents the meeting between Zelensky and Trump on Monday. That will evoke memories of a meeting in the White House Oval Office in February. So when you hear that, oh, Zelensky's meeting Trump, you're going to remember the last meeting that Zelensky had in Washington with Trump. So that's evoke memories. You can say, every time I eat a chocolate chip cookie, it evokes memories of my grandma, because your grandma made chocolate chip cookies. And you can change that with any food item and any person, because I'm sure you have that one person in your mind who reminds you of your childhood or a specific food item. Or you can go to a certain location and say, this park evokes memories of my wedding, because maybe you got married in a beautiful park that looks similar to this one. So it sounds very advanced. It sounds more advanced than saying, this park reminds me of my wedding. But that would be the equivalent. That will evoke memories of a meeting in the White House Oval Office in February, where Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance gave Zelensky a brutal public dressing down. So here the expression is to give someone. So Trump and Vance gave, the past simple, the someone being Zelensky. So to give someone a dressing down. Public is optional, it's an adjective. And brutal is also an adjective, which means harsh, severe, or cruel. Now, a dressing down represents criticizing or scolding that person. So said another way, you can say in this meeting where they criticize Zelensky. But that doesn't sound as severe as saying they gave him a dressing down. That sounds more severe. Now, the word brutal is used commonly in spoken English. I would say it's very much part of my regular vocabulary. I use it to describe things that I feel were difficult. So maybe I'll add just the word difficult here, but in this meaning, it's harsh or severe. So harsh or difficult, you can even think of it as severe in my example. But I might say, oh, wow, traffic was brutal. That meeting was brutal. Oh, my flight was brutal. So you know something very negative happened. So if traffic was brutal, you're going to assume I was stuck in traffic for a very long time. If I say the flight was brutal, it could mean anything. Maybe my flight was delayed. Maybe I was sitting beside someone really annoying. Maybe there was a lot of turbulence on the flight. So it could mean anything. You would have to ask me to clarify, but I am not happy. So we use that a lot. So something now was, because I've already experienced it, was brutal. Trump said a three-way meeting with Putin and Zelensky could follow. So it may happen. If it follows, then it will happen in the future. And could is a modal of possibility. So may happen. Kyiv's European allies welcomed Trump's efforts, but vowed to back Ukraine. If they vowed, it means they said they will, but they said it and they mean it. So it's like saying they promised, basically, because you can say something and not do it, but if you vow, it sounds a lot stronger. So a similar word choice could be promised, but promise to back Ukraine. So back means to support. So they promised to support, but vow sounds even stronger than promise. Now, in this case, back is a verb, to back. That's the infinitive. And it's, again, a replacement to support. So you could conjugate it in the past simple and say they backed Ukraine. That would be the past simple. This is commonly used in a phrase, which you probably know. I've taught this to my students many times before. The phrase is, I've got your back. So to have one's back. So your back, her back, his back. Now, in this case, back is a noun, but it's the same thing as saying, I will support you. That's what it means, but it's using back as a noun. In this case, back is being used as a verb, and that's also quite common. But vowed to back Ukraine and tighten sanctions. So they vowed to back Ukraine. They vowed to tighten sanctions on Russia. When asked what he would advise Zelensky to do, Trump said, gotta make a deal. Gotta make a deal. So this is what Trump would advise Zelensky to do. Notice this pronunciation, advise. So that's a voiced sound like a Z. And this is the verb form, to advise someone. And then Trump's advice is, did you notice I just changed to the noun form? Trump's advice. The advice belongs to Trump. So Trump's advice is, and notice that advice, so the S sound, the unvoiced. Trump's advice is gotta, which is short form for you must, you have to. So got to becomes gotta, but got to is also more informal way of saying you have to. And then a more severe sounding choice would be you must. You must make a deal. And that's what Trump is advising Zelensky. And notice this collocation with deal. Deal is the noun and make is the verb. So they go together. You don't do a deal, you make a deal. Make a deal. So make is a collocation. And we made a deal. That's the same thing as saying we agreed. We agreed. So when you make a deal, that's when it's finalized. But then after you can say we have a deal. We have a deal because the deal exists. And the word deal represents the agreement between us. So we made a deal. And now because we made a deal, we have a deal. And that's the end of the article. So I'll read the article from start to finish and you can focus on my pronunciation. What to know about the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. When President Trump was flying to Alaska for his summit with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, Trump said the main goal was a ceasefire. He said he'd be disappointed if it didn't happen and warned of severe consequences. But shortly after meeting Putin, Trump reversed himself and said a ceasefire in the Russia-Ukraine war wasn't critical. He wrote on social media that it was determined by all that the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement, which would end the war, and not a mere ceasefire agreement, which oftentimes do not hold up. Experts across the defense and foreign policy spectrums agree that external monitors and international security guarantees for Ukraine are the only way a ceasefire or even a full-fledged peace settlement between Russia and Ukraine would have a chance of success. And there was no indication from Putin on Friday that he was prepared to accept anything like that. Zelensky said Russia's unwillingness to pause the fighting would complicate efforts to forge lasting peace. Nevertheless, Zelensky said he would meet Trump in Washington on Monday. That will evoke memories of a meeting in the White House Oval Office in February, where Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance gave Zelensky a brutal public dressing down. Trump said a three-way meeting with Putin and Zelensky could follow. Kyiv's European allies welcomed Trump's efforts but vowed to back Ukraine and tighten sanctions on Russia. When asked what he would advise Zelensky to do, Trump said, Gotta make a deal.
Do you want to keep learning English with the news? If you do, put let's go, put let's go in the comments. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Watch it now.